What's up, everybody? Good evening. It's We Talking About Sports. It's Tuesday, and we're back with another edition of We Talking About Sports on the Wire. Little three-man weave today. I'm Roland. I'm joined by Ron and Ben today. Fellas, how's your week going? Have a good weekend this past weekend?
For me, it was all good. I mean, fantasy didn't go too well with Rasheed Rice going down, but we'll get into that
Yeah,
here
how
in a
else did
bit.
fantasy go well?
And then I had my toilet bowl against Ron. We kind of signed off Sunday on the sit down talking about our 0-4, our 0-3 against 1-2, and Ron's team DeAndre Swift career week this weekend. So I'm not having as a week as DeAndre Swift is. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift, a player that had his back against the wall, in real life and in the fantasy world, and he came through with a big performance. Ron, how are you doing over there?
Shit, man, I'm doing great. I'm sharing this on my social media on Facebook. So everybody who's watching, everybody who's going to join in the live chat, go ahead and do the same. But my weekend went well. I had a 3-0 fantasy week. I won all my leagues, and it was thanks and due to the show. Thanks and due to this show right here. So we got some good action for you guys for tonight. We're going to do the waiver wire, give you our best players, and go over some injuries. And cap it off with where are we ending it with? Cut or
some keeper cut. Yeah, some keeper cut. Another edition of that. Ben and I touched on some players last week. I think we talked about Zamir White. He's a guy that we talked about cutting. You can cut the ties again with him if you didn't this week. He had another fumble, I want to say, this past week. So he's a guy in the doghouse on a bad team. We talked about Mark Andrews, about maybe holding on to him. He didn't do so well. Another goose egg for Mr. Mark Andrews. So yeah, we're gonna get into some keeper cut and the injuries. We're gonna talk about that just right now. And then also Ron didn't mention, but this is the first week of bye weeks. So very important. Got to start planning for all of that. There's some important fantasy players on the bye this week. So always got to plan for that. And we're going to talk about all of that here right now. Let's get to it. It's the injury report to start off. Excuse me, double click there. It's Rasheed Rice. This one hurts me near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of Rasheed Rice in my fantasy teams. The picture here, I just wanted to show it here because it was a freak accident. If you guys were watching the play, it was a Patrick Mahomes interception. Rasheed Rice hustling back, actually forced a fumble. I want to say the Chiefs almost recovered it, and then Patrick Mahomes just comes in and takes his leg out. Pretty gruesome injury. Rasheed Rice in obvious pain, on the sideline, didn't want to go into the tent, didn't want to get onto the cart to be carted off to the locker room. Tough scenes. And I have it here in parentheses. It's unknown how long he's going to be out. They weren't able to conclude whether or not he really tore his ACL. That was a worry initially after looking at the play, and that's what was circulated around after the game. But Rasheed Rice goes down. We won't know anything until next week. So he was a guy looking like a wide receiver number one. If you drafted him, taking the chance that he wasn't going to get suspended, it was paying dividends for you. So before we get to the next guy, Ben, Rasheed Rice injury, are you, automatically just, saving a spot for him and until you hear more? Or is this guy that's, he's potentially going to be on your drop list soon?
I think just the unknown is just his hesitancy to get on the card or go to the blue tent. He's probably seeking a second or third opinion. I think it's a wrap. I'm not going to cut ties until I get official word, but I think it's a wrap. I don't think if he comes back, and if it's an ACL, obviously he's not coming back this year. But if he does come back this year, I would assume it would be later on towards the NFL playoffs, past the fantasy football playoffs. So not very hopeful, Roland. I am going to wait to hear the official news. But for Mahomes, what are you doing, bro? You're the quarterback. Why are you going and throwing yourself in there like that? You are the franchise. And then you're going to go and throw your shoulder in there on a tackle like that? That's a high IQ player making a stupid ass play. Bro.
Those are the type of plays that we're getting on defenders about, targeting the knee and taking out the players' ACLs, that we've been complaining about for years. Ron, what are your thoughts on the play? Rasheed Rice, any hopes for him, you think, just based off watching? I know we're not doctors here, but what are your thoughts on the injury overall?
Thoughts on the play? It's like Tony Romo going balls out in the last preseason game that year, and he just screws up his back and ruins his career. It's like, what are you doing, dude? That's what it brought me back to. As far as Rice goes, I think he's done as well. It's just now we're seeing teams hold that information a little bit closer to the chest, just like they did with CMC. Mason comes out post game interview and says, "Oh, I knew Friday." So I think teams are holding back information. They don't want to release that he's officially out, but I think he's done.
Yeah, well, fortunate for him, he has the out tag, so you can easily put him on to your IR slot probably. So they're not playing any games with that. They already ruled him out, but just don't know if he's going to be on the injury reserve. I probably think I agree with Ron and Ben. He'll probably go there, but we'll see. Holding out hope though. CMC, he's on this list again because he got word that he has Achilles tendonitis in both legs. He's in Germany seeking another opinion or doing some of those treatments that aren't necessarily legal in the States, going over to Germany, like some other players have done in the past. If you had the money to spend it, for sure go ahead and do that. But CMC got some bad news, tendonitis in both legs, still in the IR. I mean, if you got Jordan Mason, kudos to you. You got a running back one the rest of the year probably. But if you're a CMC owner, you took him number one. Man, I mean that's a permanent spot on your IR. We'll talk about potentially dropping them a little bit later, but just moving on through the list real quick. Jonathan Taylor, mid-thigh ankle sprain. He's week to week. He said he felt good after the game, so we'll see more to come there. But that is something to monitor. A backup there is Trey Sermon. We won't talk about him, but just a name to know. And then Christian Watson. He got a high ankle sprain, and he's going to be week to week. Ben and Ron, those three names that we just talked about, what do you want to touch base on before we move on?
Yeah, for me, I'll just do on CMC. I mean, I don't feel sorry for CMC owners because coming into this draft, we even wait to the last week, of the preseason, after the preseason, literally the Saturday before, NFL kicks off that Thursday. And there was rumblings of a nagging injury for him. You never want to take a guy you hear Achilles. I mean, you would think that's, in the NFL draft, you see these guys fall like hell. I just expected to see that with CMC this year, but in most leagues, he still went one, times two. So I don't feel bad. And like you said, for those Mason owners, if you were a CMC owner and you knew that he was out with what he was out, you should have been attempting to get Mason if you weren't able to scoop him up on the wire. If you didn't trade for him yet, the price tag now is just outrageous. Like good on the Mason owners. That might be the pickup of the season.
Yeah, Ron, any thoughts on these players here?
Jonathan Taylor, to me, he just got going, man. Week 1 wasn't great. Week 2 wasn't the best, but then week 3 got better, and he just came off a huge game in week 4. And then to see you as an owner like myself and get excited for that, and then just like everybody else, injury bug happens. That's probably the biggest one to me, because if he's gone, I think the Colts are completely done. Anthony Richardson can't seem to stay on the field. Their defense is giving it up to the run and the pass. That's your last hope, as fans of the Colts. And if he's done, your season's definitely done.
Yeah, and another note there on Jonathan Taylor that makes it a little bit more worrisome. It is that same ankle that he had surgery on a couple of seasons ago. I don't think it was this last season, but the season prior, I think he missed a good chunk of it because of ankle surgery, and this is the same ankle. Other injury news before we move on: Nick Chubb, he got activated. His practice window's open. He's back in practice, so he has about 21 days to be fully activated and on the game day roster. Back to that Colts game, Anthony Richardson, he exited the game. He had about a hip injury, I think it was. Like the note on this, and I think it's kind of interesting, he could have returned if needed. So that means that he wasn't completely hurt. He probably could have come back in the game, but they opted to stick with Joe Flacco. They had some success passing the ball. They were moving the ball on that Steelers defense. Anything to read into there, or just normal injury notes for Ben and Ron here?
Yeah, I like that we didn't mention the last guy in this picture here. I think we should make a pact to just not make notice of this guy for the rest of the fantasy year, because he's just always on the injury report. And I think that we just got to cross him off all of our boards, bro. We're going to talk about his replacement, but done with him. Done with him, number 9.
Yeah, Christian Watson can't stay off the injury report. Wasn't very productive to start the year. I know, Jordan Love has been hurt. He's dealing with Malik Willis, even though he's playing well. Ron, any parting shots here for the injury report?
Nah, man, I'm pretty good.
All right, let's get into it. It's a bye week alert here. This is the first week of bye weeks, 4 teams on bye, and some pretty notable players with the Eagles, Lions, Chargers, and Titans all being on bye. Those are some high-level running backs, some high-level receivers with Gibbs, Montgomery, Saquon Barkley being out. Pollard had a good game for the Titans this past week. So, yeah, those are the important names to think of when you're looking at the bye. Some other names noted here on the bottom. Just running through it. Guys, any notes here on the bye week alert?
Yeah, for me, it kind of sucks that Monday night was a shootout. Everybody on the Lions scored. Laporta finally got going, and then now he got a bye week. So that does suck. Had a little bit of an ankle injury, was on the injury report last Tuesday when we did the show. Played through it, looked good. Bye week to get healthy, and hopefully Laporta comes back and kind of turns up that tight end position that's lacking this year.
Good note there. Ron, anything from you?
Let's see. Dude? If you're an Eagles owner, you're pissed. But if you're a Lions owner, that's like your whole offense, and they all produce. It's not like over here with the Eagles. It's mainly just Barkley. Devontae Smith was already gone to injury. Brown was gone to injury. But you have a full healthy Lions squad. With guys like Gibbs and St. Brown and Jamo over there. So. If you're a Lions owner, I think it hurts the most.
Don't like to see the early bye week. And Roland, what do you think about A.J. Brown? After this bye week, he should be back, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, with the Eagles, on the flip side of what Ron was saying, that's a team that the bye week couldn't come soon enough for. It's a team that's struggling. They might be, dead in the water in real life just based on how they're playing. They have some injuries on the offensive line. They're 2 receivers, Brown and Smith, as we just talked about, been on the injury report. But to answer your question, Ben, yeah, I want to say this is the week that A.J. Brown was probably alluding to when he said that he was going to be out a couple of weeks. He knew that he had that early bye week. Hopefully that means he comes back healthy off of it. Same thing for Devonta Smith with that concussion. Hopefully he's back after this bye week, and I know one of my teams needs him. So for sure, hoping he's back there with that hamstring injury. Bye week couldn't come soon enough for the Eagles. Real quick, you guys think that they're going to be a playoff team this year, just off what you've seen? I know we're talking fantasy mainly, but just off what you've seen from the Eagles, playoff team or not?
With how good the Commanders surprisingly have been, I'm going to say no. But, I mean, man, that's an ultimate failure. Like, for the Eagles franchise, that's Super Bowl or bust. This is a way too early, opinion or a way too early take, but I'm going to say no. They don't look very good.
Yeah, no, they don't look very good. And the thing that concerns me, the most outside of the offense is the defense. The defensive line, it's one of the most talked about units in the NFL right now. Get absolutely no pressure on the defense whatsoever. The secondary can't really guard much. And then, Sirianni, as Gabe is talking about here in the comments, him and Jalen Hurts don't necessarily see eye to eye. And when you have stuff going on like that already, kind of carrying over from the season before, you're already starting the season on edge. I just can't imagine that's a good locker room situation either.
But yeah. Blame it on Kellen Moore, right, Ron? Blame it on Kellen Moore.
I think the Eagles still have a chance to come out of the division. A.J. Brown is a huge piece. Let's admit, Saquon Barkley is still, the top 2 running backs in the league right now with Derrick Henry. Is it Reddick? I think Reddick left, right?
Yeah, he left.
My bad. He left.
I know he's waiting.
He's holding out. The Jaden Daniels Commanders are showing a lot of poise for being young guys. Terry McLaurin is getting involved a lot more in the offense. But at the end of the day, I don't think that lasts. And I think that the team that'll come out of the NFC East, is the Eagles.
Okay. All right. Ron's still holding out hope for our NFC rival, or the
Not
NFC
the
East
Cowboys.
rival, the Eagles. Not the Cowboys, but the Philadelphia Eagles still alive. All right.
But do you know the odds on that to win the division there?
Shoot, I don't have it up in front of me, but we can definitely look that up and put it up here on the screen. But I tend to think that the Commanders, I like what I've seen from them. Got a defensive-minded head coach. That defense might improve over the years. I mean, over the course of the year. And who knows, Jaden Daniels might be looking at Rookie of the Year. But anyways, guys, this is the reason why we're here today. It's to talk about the waiver wire pickups. And the first one that we're going to talk about, directly playing off that Christian Watson injury. This was a guy that was in a rotation with Christian Watson, if you will, and that the litany of receivers that they have over there. I'm not going to name all of them, but it's none other than Dontavian Wicks. He is one of the other speedy receivers that they got over there. His week 4 line after Watson went out, 5 catches, 13 targets. I want to point that out. 78 yards, 2 touchdowns, about 25 fantasy points. Got a good matchup against the Rams. Can't guard anybody right now. DJ Moore just got right for the Bears last week, and Swift tore it up against them. Projected about 12 fantasy points here. Only owned in 10% of leagues. Guys, we just talked about Rashee Rice going down. There's been some other injuries to the wide receiver position and just across the league. And this is a guy that I think you can automatically plug into your flex position. He's better than Christian Watson. Even if Christian Watson comes back, I want to say they're going to stick with Dontavian Wicks. He's proved it last year when Watson was hurt. He stepped up for them and proved that he was a guy that was worthy of a roster spot and playing time. Doing it again this year. I don't expect him to, score 2 touchdowns every week, but that 13 targets is something that's popping out to me and something I like to see, especially if you're looking for a flex spot, wide receiver 3. What say you guys here? Are you guys buying Dontavian Wicks or not so fast? And I will note Jordan Love is back and looked good towards the end of that game.
Yeah, Jordan Love is back. Number 9 is out. They need somebody. I will say, I think last week's stats are very skewed due to just the way that the game played out. I mean, they were down 28-0 and pretty much airing it out for most of the game. So great stats for most of, Love tore it up. Also, his first game back, he put up like 30 points just airing the ball out. But, I mean, I am a big believer in Jordan Love. He does need to throw to people. I think Reed – I'm not very good about calling these Packers receivers.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, like I wasn't the biggest on Reed, but he's kind of cemented himself as the guy, I think, there. And, they do need a number 2, Wicks. 13 targets is a lot. I mean, 5 receptions on those 13 targets. The percentage isn't the best. But I'm pumping the brakes. I'm not mad at picking him up, in 12-man leagues. But I'm all right. I'm good.
What say you, Ron? You got any love here for Dontavian Wicks?
He's a guy to go get. I don't know if you're wasting a lot of fab on him or if you're running, or if you're first or second in waiver priority, if you want to waste that on him. But if you can get him, I know this is the waiver wire show, but somebody I wouldn't get on the waiver wire. But once that waiver wire closes, he's somebody who you can go get right away for free. I'm a big guy on Jaden Reed. I have him in 2 of my leagues. And the game script was huge last week, just like Ben said. And I think this guy only gets on the field when it's more of a three wide receiver set. They've been going to the tight end there as well. And don't forget they have Jacobs back there who they want to get involved. So pass on the waiver wire for me.
Dang. I mean, for me, honestly, out of all the guys that we're going to talk about, this is probably my favorite guy here. I think he's probably the best guy on the waiver wire this week, personally. 10% owned. He's stepping into a big role. Jordan Love, he's back. And, in 7 games without Christian Watson last year, he's done this already. He's already shown us, 4 touchdowns in those 7 games without Christian Watson. So, I like Dontavian Wicks this week. Definitely think he's a guy you got to go out and get. And especially, too, this is a waiver wire show. And if you're here, you probably have experienced a lot of injuries, too. There's Cooper Kupp is out. Rashee Rice just went down. There's a lot of injuries out there. And there's some teams that could use some immediate production. And I like Dontavian Wicks and got a good matchup against the Rams. So, guys, don't pay too much attention to my counterparts here. I think he's a guy that you definitely need to pick up on your team. If you can stomach it.
This is a guy that we come back to at the end of the year, and you're gonna be like, you see, week 5 show, fucking told y'all.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely have that marked down for sure. Next guy, sticking with the Packers, different position though. Tucker Kraft, another guy that popped in week 4. Again, I think Ben hit it right on the head. It was a good game script, but nonetheless, he produced with that script. 6 catches, 9 targets. 53 yards, a touchdown. 17 fantasy points, got a good matchup. We just talked about it with the Rams. In line for double digits. Has been a weak year for the tight end position, starting to pick up a little bit, but overall still weak. You got guys like Taysom Hill leading the position. Obviously, he's playing different positions throughout the game. But Tucker Kraft, another good pickup here. If you need help at the tight end position, guys are going crazy right now. But I think he's a long-term fix at the position. Going into the year, he was injured. He had a little pec injury, and he was already competing with Musgrave. So I think the shine off of him was kind of off going into the season. So kind of flew under the radar. Tucker Kraft, another guy I like. Ben and Ron, what do you guys say about Tucker Kraft?
I can get behind this one. I did like him at the end of last season, showed flashes. He's athletic. I saw him hurdling dudes at the end of last year. So like you said, he wasn't on the field just yet with that injury that he got in the preseason. Now that he's there at the tight end position, I've been playing like Freiermuth, in leagues where maybe I drafted Evan Ingram and he hasn't suited up yet this year. But I'm not mad at this. I like this. I'm willing to start Kraft this week against the Rams. If I have tight end problems, I'm definitely going this route. Yes.
What about you, Ron? You got any love for the second-year player?
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, just because tight ends this year as a whole in the league have been shit. Let's be honest. Kelsey wasn't doing much. Laporta is on a bye, so he's not even going to be available. And that's somebody who you went to get early. It's just a mix, man. It's just you're going to drop your hand in, a bucket of marbles, and hopefully you pick the shiniest one. And I don't mind him, though. He's somebody that I wouldn't mind going and getting on the waiver.
Yeah, especially for a position pressed as a tight end, right? I mean, I'm a guy personally, one of my leagues, I have Mark Andrews. I'm staring at goose eggs every week. I'm probably going to go out and look for a guy like Tucker Kraft and just, cut the BS and just get some points out of that position. All right, so some more love for Tucker Kraft, another tight end here. Again, just playing on the theme of, just, hey, if we're looking at a guy like Cade Otton, it's probably because the tight end position just in general is not doing good. But nonetheless, Cade Otton here, 11 points in PPR this past week. No real competition at the position for him in Tampa Bay. He slots in right behind Mike Evans and Godwin. Got a good matchup against Atlanta this coming week, projected for about 8 fantasy points, only owned in 6% of leagues. Ron, do you think your boy Baker can support Cade Otton here for multiple weeks, or is this just a spot play because he's got a good matchup with Atlanta?
I couldn't say too much about Tucker Kraft because this is the guy that I was going to. I'm holding him in my pocket. Everybody watching the show is going to thank me after they go get Cade Otton this week because it hasn't been just last week. In back-to-back games, he's had at least 8 targets and 6 catches. He's averaged about 50 yards in his last 2 games. He hasn't had a TD, but this week he's going to grab it. Even last week, when they were up early, we talked about game scripts. They were still up. Baker had those, I think, like 300 yards or 200 something yards in the first half. They were up early. He had thrown 2 touchdowns, and they didn't stop passing the ball because that's what they're going to do this year. Their running backs aren't great, so there'll be opportunities for Cade Otton. And with a quarterback like my Baker this year, Cade Otton to Baker Mayfield connection is going to be a nice stack for you to win your league.
Ben, what say you? This Bucs offense, I think people were kind of iffy on it coming into the season. They lost Canales, which was a big benefit, or I guess he was a big reason for a lot of their success last year. He was given a lot of credit. What are your thoughts on Cade Otton and this Bucs offense?
I'm not saying it can't happen, Ron. I'm just saying I think that if you don't pick this guy up this week, like 11 points isn't turning heads. Even at, a tight end position that's pretty weak. I need to see it again. I need to see it one more week. I mean, if you have the roster spot, maybe stash him, but let's see what happens this week. I'm not willing to jump in. Like with Kraft, I think that he could be a season-long fix. With Otton, I just got to see it. I mean, Godwin's getting a lot of targets. Evans getting a lot of targets.
In week 3, he had 7 7 catches on 8 targets.
Cade Otton is the guy that you can, stroll into work at like 8:30 in the morning, check your phone, and he'll probably still be there on the waivers tomorrow
100%.
morning. Cade Otton is that guy. But, you can't argue with the production that Ron noted for sure. I mean, that you want that out of that position, right? I mean,
Hopefully
you
y'all
don't
don't
want
get
0
him.
points.
Hopefully y'all don't get him then. I'm going to go get him.
All
right. Well, and this is another guy we'll come back and talk about here a couple weeks down the line. And that's why I asked the question though, Ron. If you thought he was a season-long spot guy, because he does have a good matchup against Atlanta, who's 27th against the tight ends per ESPN. But yeah, Cade Otton. Next guy on the list, we're kind of circling back. Ben and I talked about him last week as a long shot on this podcast. We said, hey, we got some bye weeks coming up. Jalen Hurts, week 5 bye. Jared Goff, week 5 bye. Justin Herbert, if you're into that type of thing, even though, not a lot of guys are starting Herbert, but still a lot of guys coming up. We talked about Fields. He put up 32 fantasy points against the Colts. Pretty good matchup for him. It was indoors. Doing it through the air, I think it's important to note he's QB6 through the year, so it's been consistent production through 4 weeks. He's only rushed over 50 yards twice this year. I know they've only played 4 games, but Justin Fields, you think he'd clear 50 yards in all 4 games, but only done it twice. So he's doing it through the air. 3 total touchdowns. Got a good matchup against Dallas, who just put DeMarcus Lawrence on the injured reserve. Micah, haven't heard what he's going to be doing on his podcast, but he's out another couple weeks, or maybe with that ankle injury. And Justin Fields still only owned in 34% of leagues. I will note, still has not been named the rest of the year starter. Don't know what's going on there. But Ben, we talked about him last week. You liked what he was doing as a fantasy guy. I know you're a Justin Fields guy overall. What are your thoughts on Fields this coming week and rest of the year?
Yeah, last week when we talked about him, we had him and Anthony Richardson up there, and you were like, this week, with Anthony Richardson going against the Steelers, are you streaming a guy like Fields over Richardson? I mean, we saw what happened. I will say this was a little bit of game script also. The Colts jumped out early.
Yeah.
Pretty big lead, and he was having to throw a lot. I mean, I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at streaming Fields. I don't think that he can be your season-long starter. I know you mentioned he's like QB 4 or 5 or 5 or 6. Six on the season so far. I don't think that he ends up in the top 10 by any means. That was a pop game, and if you did stream him last week, you're welcome. But thank you for listening. First and foremost. But I'm not. It's ugly, bro. Like, it might work again this week because the Cowboys are beat up. But man, if you're starting him, you don't want to watch him play, like, because you're gonna pull your hair out or you're gonna grow gray hair. It's not a fun watch. It's kind of just look at the end and just see what the hell happened.
You just hope that he ends up with those 20 plus points that he's been getting on a weekly basis. Ron, Fields, he only threw over 250 yards 3 times last year. He's almost done it twice already this year. He had like 245 the week before, 312 this week. Same question essentially to you that I asked Ben. Do you think Fields is a good pickup this week, and do you like him the rest of the year? And you're on mute.
I definitely don't like him for the rest of the year. I don't really like him this much either. Going against Dallas, he's still not confident. He doesn't have that confidence to me to make those passes down the field. He'll throw it to, Pickens, and hopefully he goes and makes a catch. But I don't see a lot of confidence in Justin Fields, especially if you're watching him as your quarterback. You're not confident. You're kind of flipping the coin and saying, hopefully he goes off. And another thing is there's some other quarterbacks there that I wouldn't mind going and getting instead of him. Andy Dalton's probably available. Call me crazy, but he's been balling. Let's just be honest. Who else was here that I would have gotten? Even like a Matt Stafford going against Green Bay. His receivers are gone, but he's somebody who's out there slinging it as well. So I don't think he's that much more elite than some of the guys that are available to where you need to go get him.
Yeah, I still take Fields probably over those guys you just mentioned, and in part just because he gives you that rushing ability too. I know I just said he's only rushed over 50 yards twice this year, but he's still going to give you that. And he's a guy, like Ben said, you're not going to want to watch it. So you got to separate real life from fantasy life. And, Fields, at the end of the day, for the most part, he's been a good fantasy quarterback while he's been a starter. And hey, he's not on the Bears anymore. I agree with you guys. Probably doesn't have the confidence to win you games in real life, even though they're 3-1. Hasn't had the hardest schedule, but for this week and beyond, I think Fields is going to be viable for the rest of fantasy, unless he gets benched for whatever reason. If he just reverts back to what he was completely in Chicago, which I don't think is going to happen. I think he's in a better structure, a better overall environment. So I like Fields this week and the rest of the year. I'll be streaming him this week. Only owned in 34% of leagues.
If he can give you 32 again, that'd be great.
I will say
he put up 11 week 1 and 11 in week 2. Then he went to 18.
Yeah,
but I mean, you just mentioned Dalton and Stafford, guys that are on teams that are on sinking ships for the most part, and they don't give you the running aspect.
The running aspect. I watched all of the game this past week in the red zone. He really does make up his mind, and he rushed twice for a score this past week. So inside the 5, he is a threat with that zone read.
And take it from me, I've hated on, but I've been against Justin Fields for the past 3 years, and I've been right. While you guys have all been on Justin Fields and betting on the
he was just Bears, on the wrong team.
Hey, who knows? Maybe that's it. But I'm giving Justin Fields some flowers. I like him this week again against the Cowboys, and maybe those are my famous last words. And Cowboys, sack him 12 times. We'll see. Another quarterback, a guy that we're kind of circling back on, and this is just because the performance that he had last night. This is complete game script. He's in a complete shootout. 56 passes, but he completed 38 of them. As Geno Smith almost touched 400 yards last night, 1 touchdown, 22 fantasy points almost. Got a good matchup against the Giants, who've been somewhat respectable, but they're ranked 16th, projected 17 fantasy points, only owned in 29% of leagues. Guys, the game plan for the Seahawks has been to go vertical, to pass it a lot, and then have Kenny Walker hit a pop play every now and again when he's healthy. Seems to be working for them. Didn't completely end up in a victory for them last night, but the offense was still successful against that Lions defense. Ron and Ben, what are your thoughts on Geno Smith as a streamer and just week to week?
Yeah, I'm not too mad at it. I don't think that he's that good. I think that they've played really bad teams.
Yeah.
I did think that the Lions defense was going to have more success stopping them. And I will say the offense did their part for the most. Kenneth Walker, like you said, when healthy, damn, bro, that guy is a pretty good fantasy football running back and just running back in general.
He got juice.
Yeah, Geno's throwing to JSN a little bit more also. I mean, haven't seen him get in the end zone, JSN. Recently, I know he had that one pop game, but I don't think that they're for real, the Seahawks. I really don't. I think that Geno's best games have already been played with how weak the schedule was. I know this week they have another great matchup. This might be the last of it. They come up against the 49ers next week. And that's always, just a big brother, little brother type game. So this might be the last week, as far as getting Geno off in a minute. They have a couple of tough games that they're going to be coming up on. But I'm not mad at it this week against the Giants. Definitely not.
Yeah, Geno definitely more of a streamer, related to, guys being on bye and, good matchup against the Giants. Rob, what are your thoughts on Geno Smith, his performance last night and, going forward?
I'm going to say this is a guy who I would do more long-term opposed to Justin Fields. And he's 29% owned. Fields was 34% owned. So I guess I mentioned the wrong quarterbacks, but Geno is somebody who you would rather go get that's available than Justin Fields, even though he doesn't have the running ability like you guys said. 17 in week 1, 17 in week 2, 12 week 3, and then 21. So he's been a little bit more consistent as well. If you need a guy who's just going to go there for the rest of the year and get you a decent 18 to 20 points a week, Geno's your guy. He might not go for 30, but he ain't going for 10 or 12 either. So I think Geno's a solid pick. I would probably go, if you're in a 2 quarterback league like I am in one of mine, these are kind of the guys that you want, guys who are just going to go up there and sling it around. So he almost passed for 400 yards. DK's more involved this year, which is going to give you a deeper threat to get more points out of Geno as well. Kenneth Walker is back, but that's only going to open up the Going blank. What?
The
Give me
passing
the
lanes.
terminology
Passing
here.
lane. Yeah, it's gonna open up the passing lanes for him. The play action.
Play action. There
Yeah.
we go.
Play action.
Fuck.
There we go. Yeah. Well, to your point, Ron, he's surrounded by a lot of weapons there in
That
Seattle.
was an easy one.
Even without Kenny Walker, they have Zach Charbonnet, so they got almost a two-headed monster there in the backfield. And then they're 3-4 deep at receiver. And then when you throw in Noah Fant, who looked good these past few weeks, I think he had a big drop last night though. But still, I like Geno Smith. He's on a good team. I do agree with Ben somewhat. Just overall, they might be fraudulent, but it's a good offense that you want to be a part of. And Geno Smith is the quarterback. He's a maestro there. Any last thoughts on Geno before we move on to our next guy?
Mm-mm.
All right, let's get to it. We're changing it up a little bit. This guy, a little bit more of a long shot here. These last few guys are going to be along that same vein. It's none other than Josh Downs. He's only owned in 9% of leagues. He's coming off a high ankle sprain. That's kind of why he fell off in the beginning of the year. There's high expectations for him to take that next leap. Second-year player, but again, got hurt in preseason. That lingered into the regular season. Last week, though, with Joe Flacco at quarterback, 8 catches, 9 targets, 82 yards and a tud, 22 fantasy points. Got a good matchup against Jacksonville. Everybody's been taking the Jaguars for a ride this year, especially that secondary. So maybe Josh Downs is next in line, especially if you're hurting again at receiver. This is a guy, long shot, don't have that screen up, but I would say he fits that mold at only 9%. Guys, are you waking up early on Tuesday or Wednesday, going into work and looking to see if you can nab some Josh Downs?
After the Joe Flacco is the starter news comes out, because if it's Richardson, I'm back to not wanting any part. Michael Pittman owners, for example, we were talking about this guy cut, what do you do with him? Joe Flacco comes in the game and Michael Pittman has, a very serviceable fantasy game, but on everybody's bench. I think that if Joe Flacco's the starter, and I don't expect him to be, because you said that if, push came to shove, AR-15 would have come back in the game.
But don't you think it's a little weird, though, that if that was the case, that they didn't bring him back?
The same thing happened with Will Levis on Monday night.
Yeah. Well, I think Will Levis, that's a different story, because him and the coach have had some spats. But go on, Ben. What were you saying?
I just don't – they're not giving up on Anthony Richardson just yet. There's no way. I'm not the GM or the head coach. I'm a hater of the guy, but that's what it would take to give up on him already.
And I guess just depth chart wise, though, it's important that, Josh Downs, he's pretty much he put Adonai Mitchell to the back. I think he got some looks in the beginning of the year, but it's Josh. Yeah, Pierce is still there, but I think Pierce is still going to keep his role a little bit. Ron, any love for Josh Downs? He's not a guy that you'd probably spend any fab on. I think he's a guy you can probably, sneak onto your team. Are you willing to do that? Or you like Ben, you just want a part of that offense if Joe Flacco's at the helm?
No, I don't want any part of Josh Downs. He's just too much of a risk for me. There's too many things that you can think of that are wrong with that squad. And then I don't know. He's just not somebody that kind of sticks out to me. But
yeah, he's not a number one receiver by any means, and completely contingent on having a quarterback that, can spread the love around. And he's not, just a dude like Anthony Richardson, 1 or 2 looks and then down the field. But anyways, for deeper leagues, for deeper leagues, and for guys that have some roster woes.
If Joe Flacco's the starter, by all means. If Joe Flacco's the starter, Pittman might be my flex of the week this Sunday. If Flacco gets named the starter, Allen sounds like he's a Pittman owner. What he says, Pittman on the bench and finally producing. I think if Flacco gets named the starter, and it's got to happen either tomorrow or Thursday when they say who's going to start the game. If Flacco's starting, Pittman's a go, bro. And, guys like Josh Downs might be serviceable.
Yeah, you like the target share too. 9 targets is nothing to bat an eye at. But we move on to Chase Brown. This is for, maybe 10-man leagues, not as deep leagues out there. Maybe somebody dropped him because they didn't like the production the first couple of weeks. But it's Chase Brown. He popped this past week. He was a stud, 2 touchdowns. You see the production up there, 80 yards rushing, added in with 2 catches, 12 yards, 23 fantasy points. kind of a tough matchup against Baltimore, but I think the moral of the story here is if, Chase Brown is available in your league, I think he's the guy you want to pick up because you're going to be able to, plug him in if you need some points, throughout the year. And maybe he surpasses Zach Moss, but I don't see that coming exactly at this point in the season. Ben, any thoughts on Chase Brown here?
Agreed. I also don't think if you're a Zach Moss owner, you go get Chase Brown.
Nah, you're hoping Zach Moss holds a job probably.
And Zach Moss has been very consistent. He got in the end zone as well. He had his 15 points.
True.
RB 18 right now on the season for 18. Zach Moss.
Yeah,
RB 18. I don't see him losing. I know that he did get one goal line touch here, Brown, but it's a guy that you go get if you're struggling at the running back position. There's been injuries at the running back position as well. Pacheco owners, if you're somebody who punted on running back, I'm not saying you go and start this guy, but you kind of wait and play it out, stash him on your roster. He's not a go get him and start him, but it's somebody that has some potential later on.
And a guy that you can plug in as bye weeks get started, right? I mean, he's a guy that, if you have him on your roster already and you have two of your starting running backs on bye at the same week, not saying that happens for everybody, he's a guy you can plug in. Ron, any love for Chase Brown in this backfield out of Cincinnati, who showed some life in the Battle of the Cats against the Panthers?
Bad matchup this week also.
Fuck. He's tough, man. He's tough because he's so good and he's so talented that he's somebody that, of course, you want, on your team. But is he gonna get that availability? I think he had three carries week 1, 4 carries week 2, and then 7 week 4. So I just don't know if the consistency is there. As much as Burrow's gonna want to throw the ball to his receivers, that's always going to be the number one option, I think, over there in Cincinnati. And that's why Joe Mixon didn't do very well over there either, because I think they were just so set on passing the ball all the time. And then you have to get carries away from Zach Moss. So this is, to me, one of the ones where you're waking up in the morning, walking to work, and if he's there, you get him. Because he's so good that if Zach Moss does go down, like all the other running backs have gone down this year, then I think you're super set, like a Trey Mason style. Yeah, he will be the guy the rest of the way.
He's a next in line guy for sure. One injury away, and he's a guy. A lot of people had high hopes for him coming into the year, just because he was a more athletic guy and the guy with more pop. And he has gotten an increase in production the last 2 weeks. Maybe that's by design. And Zach Moss isn't a guy that I think is a set in stone RB1 where you can't be like, hey, let's give some more looks to Chase Brown. So yeah, we'll see. Got some love for Chase Brown. Although
do you go get 5% if Jonathan Taylor's ruled out? Do you go get Chase Brown or do you go get Sermon?
I'd probably go get Chase Brown over Trey Sermon. I don't think Trey Sermon's that good personally, and I don't think he's going to be the receiving back either. They got another guy over there. His name's escaping me, but yeah, Trey Sermon was a guy that I was going to mention after we got done talking about this guy. This is a more of a speculative play, if anything. Trey Tucker only on 10% in leagues, has popped. I want to say the last few weeks, the week before last in garbage time. Popped this week again, 15 fantasy points. Got a scary matchup against Denver. Don't know if he's going to draw the Patrick Surtain treatment. Maybe he will, because I mentioned this is speculative based on Devontae Adams. He formally requested a trade today. He was sneakily added onto the injury report and missed last week's game. Ron, are you adding? Are you spending any fab on this guy, or are you taking the risk that most people probably won't pick him up?
No, man, I'm going. I don't think a lot of people know about him. He's my guy. I was actually not even going to put him on the show because I don't want you guys, to go and get him.
He's a long shot, but yeah, go on.
All right. So we have the Devontae Adams issues. He might not even be a Raider much longer. You talked about the game script, right? So they are going against the Broncos. More than likely, Surtain's going to lock down the wide receiver like it always does. And then the Broncos are going to get, some sort of lead. Then the game script is going to lead that way. He had 7 catches, 96 yards, a touchdown on 9 targets in week 3. And that's the line that's not up here, but that's the line that he, went and blew up on. 7 catches, like I mentioned there, but on 9 targets. Then he had 6 targets last week on an offense that's probably going to be playing from behind. And with a quarterback like Gardner Minshew, throwing the hell out of the ball, and hit your running backs like Zamir White playing like crap. He's the PPR guy. He's the one that slowly will go get you those 12, 13, 14 points that you need just because the action is going to be there to him. So sneaky play. I like Tucker. Get him on your roster. 10%. Shit, he might be there Saturday or Sunday before the game.
Ben, what are your thoughts here? Are you looking to add Tucker in hopes that Davante Adams gets traded, or are you adding him anyways because it's looking like he might not even play for the Raiders again if things are going this bad?
Yeah, and I am a Davante Adams owner, unfortunately. But dude,
coming to the Cowboys.
I'm not mad at this. I'm not mad at
No,
this.
you're not, Dad.
I watched the game and like they were making it a point to give him that ball. The one rush for 3 yards, that was at the 3-yard line on a 4th and goal. They gave him an end around. He's fast as hell. Like he's a guy that you could give him a short pass, let him do his thing. You could hit him on the deep ball. But I did see that they are making it a point to kind of get him the ball because he's a difference maker and kind of game changer for them on offense. So I'm not mad at this. I'm not mad as ugly as the Raiders offense has been. I'm not mad at this, but I do think he'll be a guy that'll be there.
Yeah,
waivers.
I was going to say I'm not mad at it because at the end of the day, somebody has to score, especially when Davante Adams isn't there. Somebody has to catch the ball and be there. And he is a talented guy. And Davante Adams vacating, you already saw what he does without him on the field. He's only got to compete with Jacoby Myers, and I can't even name another receiver after him. And then there's Brock Bowers. But yeah, it might not be pretty, but he might get you, your 12 to 13, fantasy points in PPR. I mean, I wouldn't recommend, willingly, throwing this guy in your lineup. But if you're in one of those situations, I think he's viable. I think this is a, perfect example of a long shot. You take a shot on a guy like this when you might need him. And then, the increase in potential, targets and just overall workload with no Adams. So yeah, no, I like this guy, Trey Tucker, viable, talented guy. Got the underlying metrics from athleticism to pop. So yeah, I like Trey Tucker. A good little long shot here. Any other guys you want to touch base on? I know we talked about Trey Sermon. What were you gonna say, Ben?
Hey, Roland, and then in a keeper league for next year, 50% fab, right? For sure.
50% fab, yeah. Other guys that we didn't get to, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Talked about him as a long shot in one of our podcasts. Whittington, receiver for the Rams. Puka Nacua is going to be out another month at least. I know they get Cooper Kupp back after their week 6 bye, but Whittington, he's going to be there. He popped this week, six catches, 62 yards on 8 targets. Josh Downs, we already talked about him. Tutu Atwell, another guy for the Rams. But yeah, any other names you guys want to talk about before we move on?
It's not it's for fantasy purposes. We didn't talk about him on the injury report. I know you're a big believer. What's the news on Neighbors and the concussion? I know he had a little bit of extra time. Have you read up anything on him, or do you know anything about him?
I haven't seen anything. I think we won't hear anything until tomorrow. On Wednesday, I think are one of the better reports. But to your point, he suffered the concussion at the end of the game there on Thursday Night Football. So you like the 10-day rest, not going to play again until Sunday night or Sunday afternoon, excuse me. But it's a little scary. He's getting a lot of usage and he's running a lot of those under routes, a lot of short yardage stuff. So he's taking a lot of hits going across the middle. But yeah, hopefully he's able to play. Concussion's always scary, but like the extra rest, but we'll find out more tomorrow, I think.
Two guys, Robinson. Speaking of Neighbors for the Giants, possibility, another waiver possibility. And then I don't know if you talked about him last week, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, Leggett or Leggett.
Yeah, we
wide receiver too.
Yeah, we talked about Xavier Leggett, especially with Adam Thielen going down at the end of last game. We talked about Leggett as a potential pickup.
He's like 35% owned still. So.
Yeah, he looks like he might be viable next to Deontay Johnson. And there's words that they might move off of Deontay or Thielen. They might just completely, throw in the towel again early this year. So maybe Leggett's going to stand to eat more. And you always like those rookie receivers towards the end of the year. But yeah, good call out there. And Wan'Dale Robinson, another guy we talked about before, definitely viable. Played against him this past week, and he's running a bunch of shallow routes too. All right, well, next one, our next segment, and this is what we're going to wrap up with here for the night. It's Keeper Cut. Talked about 4 players last week. Ben and I gave our opinion on whether or not we cut those guys. We're going to do the same thing here. Guy in the middle for conversational purposes, just going to get ahead of it, but want to throw it out there anyways. First guy on the list, think it'll be pretty quick here. And consensus is none other than Christian Watson, wide receiver for the Packers. He's a guy last year, early to middle round draft pick for the most part, 5 to 8. This year, he's more of like the 7-ish, 8 to the, early double-digit rounds draft pick. Christian Watson gets hurt again. He's week to week. Ben, one word answer, yes or no. Are you keeping or cutting? Whatever you want to do.
Cut. Digging a grave, burying him in there, forgetting about him, bro, for the future. He does not exist.
You haven't even referred to him by his name. You've been calling him number 9 this throughout the podcast. Ron, your thoughts on Christian Watson, keeping or cutting him?
He's gone.
Yeah, it's consensus. He's a guy. Last year, I take it from me, I drafted him on one of my teams. I held on to him just out of hope, the draft capital would come through eventually when he got healthy. But if it's one thing that I know, Christian Watson, he's going to come back and then he might get re-injured or something might happen. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen. Never want to root for injuries. Not doing that by any means necessary, but it just might happen again. So just cut the ties with Christian Watson while you can, and fill your roster spot with some of the guys that we just talked about here on the waiver wire show. Next guy, this is just on the heels of the injury news that we got this week on CMC. He has tendonitis or Achilles tendonitis in both legs now. He's out in Germany, not even in the country. First when the Germany news came out, I thought it might be a good thing. It's like, hey, CMC, he's going the extra level or the next level to get treatment. He's going to, do something that the likes of like Kobe Bryant has done and come back, completely healthy with that Achilles. But then it comes out that it's actually in both legs. Still no word on timetable for return. Can't imagine the trade markets are very kind to you right now if you own CMC. Ben, are you at least starting to consider cutting him, especially if you might have another guy that requires the IR spot?
I'm not going to cut him, but I'm trading him 100%. He's gone. I'm going straight to the...
Are you taking anything at this point?
Like if the Trey Mason owner, I look on his bench and I see Bucky Irving, I'm like, hey, Bucky Irving for CMC straight up. What's up? I'm trying to get something in return. You just want him chilling on your IR spot? Like we said, if you didn't go and get Trey Mason, you missed the boat.
Jordan Mason.
I called him Frank, now Trey Jordan. Okay, Jordan Mason. If you're the Jordan Mason owner, now you want to go get CMC. And you can buy him pretty cheap. And he can chill on your IR spot because if fantasy playoffs come around and he's back and Jordan Mason goes back to the bench.
There you go. You got it.
Plug in CMC. So if I'm a CMC owner, I'm 100% trading and I'm taking Bucky Irving. I'm taking, Tony Pollard. Like, just throw something my way.
Man, I think if you can get Tony Pollard at this point, that's a good steal for you. And a lot of this, and Ron, I think you'd agree, a lot of this, right, depends on, your record through 4 games. Are you 4-0, 3-1? You have a stacked team with some depth, maybe hold on to him. Or if you're struggling, you're absolutely doing whatever you can to get him off your team. Is that right, Ron? Or what are you thinking here?
I'm thinking, would you get DeAndre Swift, Ben, for CMC?
Dude, that might be good right now.
Do you take that? It's because it's a running back that I used to kick Ben's ass this week in fantasy. But real talk, Ben, do you go get DeAndre Swift for CMC?
No, I don't. I mean, I still think the Bears' offense is terrible, so I wouldn't. But, I'm not mad at even thinking about it. If you're somebody who does like DeAndre Swift, obviously you started him. Like, if you're a CMC owner and you don't have, the backup, Swift will do. Fuck it. Swift will do.
I'll keep it simple, man. I'm gonna keep him. There's enough spots on your roster for him to stay. If he comes back week 13, 14, hey, you're starting
championship weeks. Yeah,
you're starting that you're starting that dude. I would say the name, but you're starting that guy, dude. And then at the end of the year, you look back at your roster, and there's like this one or two guys on your bench where you're like, "Fuck, they were on my bench all year. I never even played them, or I never even used them."
Yeah, yeah.
So just let that guy be CMC, and you're good.
Yeah, it's tough. You spend a number one draft pick on somebody. You never want to be in a situation where you have to drop the guy. But I just threw out the situation. Like, I mean, I have a team out there where I have like Cooper Cup, CMC, and Rasheed Rice. I have a build like that in one of my leagues, and I mean, I'm starting to have to make a decision, right? What do I do with Cup? Because I have three guys that are all out, and I only have one IR spot.
What's
So
your
I mean,
record?
in that league, I'm like 3-1, I think,
Wow.
or something like that. So, yeah, you just have to start making these decisions, and
With
like
bye
Ron,
weeks coming up, you definitely
yeah, and in Ron's scenario, if you can hold on for him to come back in week 13 or 14, you might be
if
looking at a league winner. But then that's what he might be out the whole year, and then you're just like, gosh. So yeah, to Ben and Ron's point, you absolutely got to try and trade him right now if you can and get something to salvage the pick, because I don't have high hopes for him coming back this year for sure. So I'll keep him and try and trade him. I'm not necessarily ready to cut bait on CMC. Got to think he still has some value out there. Next guy here, he's on the list. Not a big name, but he's on the list because he was probably the most popular fab ad a couple weeks ago. It's none other than Carson Steele. He was the guy that was going to be next in line for Isaiah Pacheco after he went down a couple weeks ago with his injury, and he got put on the IR, and Andy Reid said he might not be back all year. His only competition, Carson Steele's, was Samaje Perine. You got CEH out on IR because of PTSD. And then they added Kareem Hunt on the practice squad off the streets. But he's up here on this list because he fumbled again. And Kareem Hunt looks like he took over that backfield as, the primary rusher. Ben, are you ready to cut ties with Carson Steele? Is it easy? Or because you spent the fab and, he still is probably officially the starter, you going to hold on to him for another week?
nah. I mean, there's not much of a ceiling. Like I think he runs hard, 100%. I mean, if the Chiefs are up big and winning games, yes, but with having this little fumbling problem and the Chiefs offense needing every single possession lately, it seems like, right? It's
Yeah.
been coming down to the wire. I just don't see the trust being there with a young guy like him. He's not going to pop off a big run. So what are you really losing? With just putting Kareem Hunt in there instead of him, I'm off of him. I'm good.
Yeah, what about you, Ron? Is easy cut for you?
Yeah, super easy. I never went and even got this guy, but he was a good play that week. But nah, man, I'm off this dude.
Yeah, this is an easy cut. Even though you spent a lot of fab on him, that's just the nature of the game. You hit big sometimes, and then you miss. But this is a guy you can easily cut ties with. Carson Steele. It's a unanimous cut here from We Talking About Sports. Last guy on the list, another controversial name, just because Falcons drafted him number 4, I want to say, in real life. It's none other than Kyle Pitts. He's been a high draft pick at the tight end position the past couple of years, and he's been a bust in fantasy and in real life. Don't want to, label him that, but the facts are the facts. Hasn't really produced outside of his rookie year, really. Ben, are you cutting ties with Kyle Pitts if you dared to draft him again this year?
Allen says Pitts year after year letting me down. Allen, I think it's time that just cut ties. I'm gonna do it. I used to look at the tight end draft board, and it's like, okay, I'm punting on tight end, and this guy's the cutoff of like the decent tight ends. And like this year, Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram were that cutoff, and Kyle Pitts is off of that cutoff list, bro. Enough is enough. We came and they won. We hear Raheem Mostert say, "Oh, stats are for nerds. Who cares if Pitts gets stats or not?" Not something you like to hear. It's over for this guy, bro. This is a position that sucks already, but it's over for this guy, bro. If you get his card in NCAA 25, it's gonna be a hell of a player, but that's it. He's just good for the video games at this point, bro.
Yeah, not a very good, tight end when you line him up to block. They want him to play receiver. It's tough lookings for Kyle Pitts. Ron, what are your thoughts on the tight end?
Dude, no more than 5 targets a game. I think he has 15 the whole year. That's just targets. That's not even catches. 8 catches the whole year through 4 games.
2 catches
Dude,
a game.
bye. Like, he's out. He's done. Kyle Pitts will might not even make another fantasy league draft after this year.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts, it's extremely disappointing to see him on this list again. I haven't drafted him, but I'm not going to say that I wasn't in on him as a prospect. I liked the idea of Kyle Pitts, ultra athletic tight end, can, take almost anybody off the line. We grew up watching, Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski lining up in the slot and taking advantage of those guys for years. Thought the same was going to happen with Kyle Pitts on another level, but he can't block, so you're not going to line him up at tight end on the line, actually. And then, I hear a lot of people saying you line him up at receiver. There goes his advantage that he had, really, because he's not going to be beating a lot of corners just off of athleticism in the NFL. So that goes away. He's not going up against linebackers and stuff. So Kyle Pitts, disappointing, in fantasy and in real life. Heard somebody say today that the Falcons drafted him over Micah Parsons. So that just tells you a little bit something about,
What he was viewed
on the
as.
Falcons, yeah, and what he was viewed as too as a prospect, Kyle Pitts. But I'm cutting him if I drafted him.
He was supposed to be like that next generation of tight end with the athleticism and all that shit, bro. And we blame the head coach and the system. And here's a new head coach, a new quarterback, and the results might be worse than when Desmond Ridder was throwing him the ball last year.
Yeah, no, you definitely has not improved with Kirk Cousins at the helm. Do agree with you. Thought it was going to be a much better situation for him, especially with no Arthur Smith. But yeah, don't have high hopes for the Kyle Pitts going forward. I think you can cut him, and again, go get a guy like Kate Auden. Go get a guy like Tucker Kraft. Roll your dice there. Maybe even go with the dude like Taysom Hill at this point over Kyle Pitts, and hopefully he scores you some rushing touchdowns. So yeah, that's keeper cut. Any other guys you want to throw out there that we didn't mention for keeper cut before we wrap it up for the night?
I'm good, man.
No, I don't have anybody off the top right now.
All right, fellas. Well, it's been a good Tuesday evening cutting up with you guys, talking about some waiver wire ads and some keeper cuts. Well, as always, got to talk about injuries and bye weeks. But guys, been another fun one, and we'll talk to you all on Sunday.
Peace.
Peace.